I've seen myself on TV and it's like really grainy. So on my end, it looks as clear as you look. But when I see them like on a television broadcast, it's terrible. So I'm fighting with TDS. I'm like not convinced that that's as good as it gets out here.
It looks decent to me.
Okay. All right.
So good. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to join you.
You are our second non-business owner guest on the show. So
Good.
I'm glad to have you.
Good. Well, I'm happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I'm from Las Cruces. I just got elected Senate District 35, and geographically, it's a huge district. So it's all of Hidalgo County, which you have Animas, Lordsburg. You move over to Luna County, which you have Deming, which is primarily where the majority of the votes come from. And then all of Sierra County, which is where I currently reside, Elephant Butte, Truth or Consequences. And then I have the west side of Las Cruces, so the Picacho Hills area and all of that Old Mesilla area. And that farming Old Mesilla Valley is actually where I grew up. So like I went to Zia Middle School, Las Cruces High School. So I felt like when I started campaigning, I'm a registered Republican. There's never been a Republican to hold this seat. And I was told that really that was going to be my weak link in this whole, that would be the area that cost me the election because they're so partisan over there. And I'm happy to say we almost split the Las Cruces vote. I lost by 23 votes, which is like unheard of because they told me to give up Cruces. So I think that kind of my connection there to Las Cruces and it's still kind of being home, if I had to pick a home, really helped me out. But as I said, I currently reside up in Elephant Butte. I'm a member of the TRC school board, which I just resigned from effective January 1 so that I could better serve the community in this new role as senator. But my girls are involved in public school here. I've been very active in the New Mexico agricultural communities with a bunch of different associations over the years, and then I advocated for them as the director of Soil and Water Conservation District, so really focusing on New Mexico's natural resources.
Okay, fantastic. So what made you want to get into running for state senate?
I think just the frustration of seeing same old. I mean, I hate politics for the same reason that everyone else does. It's all backrooms, doors. We feel like our voice really doesn't matter. I set out to change that, and I'll tell you just in the 2.5 weeks since I've been elected, the swamp is thick. I mean, it's everywhere. You know, we do what we've always done because for no other reason than we've always done it that way. Not because I think that as legislators, we really want to change things. So I'm optimistic. There's a lot of younger people. I think there's a generational shift going on politically where people are just sick of it and finally stepping up because they're passionate about their community. They know the issues they're concerned about. And I feel like at some point you have to kind of step into a role of really like putting your money where your mouth is and investing the time and the resources if you really want to see real change. And I say that, I don't think you have to run for a New Mexico State Senate to see change, but I do believe, and I think there's a calling in all of us, if you are complaining about anything from your kids' elementary school to maybe the way that our universities are operating or to the conditions of your roads, at some point as a citizen, you have to take ownership of that, right? Like, well, what are you doing? Are you doing your part to better your community? And I really kind of put this out there to Las Cruces because it's such a strange area. Like if I spend time in Albuquerque, even like at the local breweries and stuff, they have like these politics and pints. They have like these round tables. Like talking politics is something that they do respectfully quite often. But I feel like in Cruces, when I grew up, it was never like that. We kind of didn't talk politics and we didn't talk religion, which is exactly what we need to be doing more of. And so I really kind of send that call out to Doña Ana County and also some of my rural counties is to step up and build a bench. I mean, if you're upset with your school district, then serve on your school board or your PTO, if that matter. Pay attention to who your locally elected officials are who are making so many policies that really impact your daily life. We spend a lot of time complaining about it. Well, then someone go out there and change it because change happens arguably pretty easy.
Really, I'll tell you that's an interesting perspective, especially in a state that seems to lean so heavily one way. To hear someone from the other side saying that change is easy.
Yeah, and I don't want to. Yeah, I think change is easy. Look, I am the first female to hold the seat and first Republican, and didn't even realize that until after I won. Just kind of the glass ceilings that were broken in that until I read it myself in reports. And I ran arguably a very conservative race. I mean, I campaigned on traditional Republican platform, if you really look at it. I'm pro-life. I want to reduce taxes. I pledge to not raise taxes. I'm pro Second Amendment. I mean, kind of check the box of family values that are important to me. But I didn't go out there and have to spearhead a Trump train to get that message, because what I did with the message is stop making it political and explain why those changes are so relatable from family to family. Like, at the end, we all value our freedom, our faith, and our family, right? So trying to connect with people to understand that I think party labels is what separates us, and the real issues, if you really get into the issues, we are more connected and have more in common than I think most people realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, I also campaigned quite a bit on just opening New Mexico, and I want to say that's not a partisan issue either. There's not a party label that goes with being a restaurant owner, a hotel owner, or a business owner by any means. So but at the same time, we need to be compassionate, acknowledge that there's a virus going on. So let's all participate in the discussion of how you balance that. I've been a big proponent of Open New Mexico, and I stress safely. I don't mean that just recklessly go in there and cause havoc that would have long term, but I think that if we all start putting party labels aside just a little bit and start talking more common sense, we can finally start moving forward.
Absolutely. So were you part of the Respect New Mexico campaign?
I know a lot about that. I know that the state Republican Party took that. I honestly ran my own party, my own campaign. I've never run for a state office. I have assisted in some other local campaigns, and I treasured my House Representative Rebecca Dow's campaign. But I kept a very small group. I didn't have influence other than myself. I had a good friend of mine who's pretty good with social media, and a longtime friend of mine who runs campaigns, actually out of Texas, that would check in and just kind of provide 30,000 foot messaging support along the way. But this was very much like a grassroots. I mean, my on the ground boots are my 10 and 12-year-old daughter. And so when I say that, I support the Respect New Mexico messaging. I agree with all that message, but that did not define my campaign, and I didn't necessarily run under that label. But I thought it was a genius way to market a party that people, for so long we've done a really bad job of just getting what exactly we believe out. That we haven't done a very good job of defining Republicans. We've let others define Republicans. And I'll tell you that on a surface level, when people talk about what a Republican is, in many cases, that doesn't define me. I'm a registered Republican. So I did like the idea of them trying to go and redefine what that looks like, to be more compassionate conservatives out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, because I believe that this election was record number of Republicans running across the state. Is that correct?
It is. I think they had 112. I mean,
Wow.
that's phenomenal. And they did a great job of recruiting people to run for office.
Do you know how many of those races they won across the state?
I don't know. I know that in the Senate, we brought 2 members from the House that ran in for the Senate. So they're legislators, but they moved from the House to the Senate. And we bought 2 brand new. Josh Sanchez, one, and myself are moving into the Senate. So overall, we lost a total of 1 seat in the Senate because we had lost 3 seats up in Albuquerque. So we're down 1 seat in the Senate. I can't give you the House numbers, but I do know that's the Senate numbers.
Okay.
Look, it was a tough year. I mean, we're a blue state. Trump was on the ticket. I say that, and I won by a good margin in my district that is predominantly registered Democrat, but is willing to cross over, vote for the person instead of party, which the numbers don't lie. They've done a great job of that over the time. So, but still, it's hard to bust into that urban area of Albuquerque, and it was, I think, whether I should say it or not, it was a wave. I mean, they got hit by a wave, that's for sure.
Sure. So let's go back a little bit, just to get to know you. What did you do before you got into politics? I know you mentioned school board and some of those things. What have you
I
done
did.
professionally?
So I raised my girls at Beaverhead Ranch, where my husband is a rancher. I came from a longtime ranching family, and they own a big outfitting company up there. I later moved to Elephant Butte, where my home is now. Really, I should tell you that my time on the ranch, we had the introduction of the Mexican gray wolf, which was really my first introduction to like an overreaching government and the absurdity of something that just doesn't make sense. Like there's nothing about imposing something that prohibits someone's ability to make a living, but even more importantly, like protect their family. Like there was no common sense in that program. It wasn't fair for landowners. It wasn't fair for people trying to make a business. And ultimately, the real conservative, it's not really fair for trying to the wolf in which they were trying to grow a population. There was no winner in that game. And so at that time is where I really started getting involved in having a voice. And I became engaged with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, which is a subdivision of state government. It's elected body, and they have as much power as a county commission. Sedona has one. Every county has a Soil and Water Conservation District that makes decisions on natural resource, ag, a lot of issues that impact a county, based on watershed. So I became quite involved. I ran for that locally elected seat to have kind of a voice for agriculture. And I served on that for quite a while until I actually transitioned into being the director of the Sierra Soil and Water Conservation District. So I was there for quite a while, and I actually had just left. I mean, I had just gone on my own for less than a year when I was running for this Senate seat. And everything in life is just about good timing. I left and I contracted back with my employers to do the parts of my job that I really loved. But I'm like a weekend warrior. I'm an after hours worker. When I'm passionate about what I do, I love to do it, but I just wasn't fitting in. I couldn't see myself forever working a 9-to-5 government job. I just want to do the best parts of it. And it was awesome because I was able to contract back with that, work with some other ag groups, spend a little bit of time in Santa Fe lobbying for some agricultural issues that I'm passionate about. And within that year, it became like we had a primary race in which a governor targeted 6 of your conservative Democrat senators. And these are like titans in the legislature. No one saw this coming. I mean, John Arthur Smith, who held the seat that I'm in, had the seat for over 30 years. Ike Smalley had it for over 30 years before him. So those 6 Senate seats were just under attack, and they had an ugly, nasty primary race. And a surprise to Republicans and Democrats alike, she made good by unseating 5 of those 6 in a primary race that nobody saw coming. They'd served under, I think someone told me John Arthur had served like under 4 governors. And of course, we know that he was targeted for, number one, the abortion bill. He stood up against abortion. He stood up against red flag to protect Second Amendment. So he broke mold in his party. And ultimately, as the chair of Senate Finance, he refused to let her tap, and not just her, but governors before her, the Permanent Land Grant Fund, New Mexico's savings account. I think we can agree that there's nobody who has a worse record of managing money than New Mexico state government. And so if there was one backstop, he's like, we can screw up everything else, but we're not tapping into the savings account. So I think it was a win regardless by unseating John Arthur because of that powerful position he held as chair of Senate Finance. But it was a surprise that all 5 of them going. They were referred to as the Conservative Coalition. And the Republicans, it was a loss to them initially because we could count on them to sometimes use some common sense and work across the aisle for the betterment of New Mexico. So I would have never ran against John Arthur. I voted for him. I was supportive of him and several of those Democrats who did good work for New Mexico. But when they lost those seats to progressive liberals, the reason why they were able to hold those seats for so long is because they served people over party. And so when you go so far left or even so far right, and the majority of the voters can't identify with that, there's a hard way to connect with it. I knew right away there's no way that Green New Deal and day of birthday abortions is going to fly in New Mexico. And so I jumped into the race at a primary race. I wasn't expecting the attention that this race ended up getting at the time, which is probably really good that you just get so caught up in the bubble that you don't know you won until you won. But right away, my opponent had been campaigning for over a year because she had just beat John Arthur. They were calling her, the giant slayer. This titan was taken down in a primary. And from the day I entered the race, I had 26 days left in a report. They do 3-month reports to report campaign finance law. You have to disclose who it is that's funding you. And so in the first 26 days alone, I introduced myself by raising $90,000, like the highest fundraiser in New Mexico for that quarter, to tell them that we are, like, I'm in this to win it. Overall, this ended up being the most expensive legislative race. I think it's ridiculous that it got that bad. I raised over $250,000, but my opponent was number two this whole cycle right under me. And I can sit here and brag about how well we did because we were raising money from farmers and ranchers. Most of my donors have never given politically. So I had to make the cry and the appeal to them that if I'm willing to sacrifice the time, to change my life, to uproot my life, to carry on this fight, we're really all in this together. We don't win. It was really, in hindsight, we did a great job. It was like boots on the ground where the community came together to really make this happen. And at the end, it ended up paying off. I mean, we had an army of volunteers, and we just did a good job of sticking on message to make sure that they understand I'm carrying Senate District 35's message. So what I had to remind them, if you will ignore party labels and vote across the aisle, I promise to them, and I'm willing to keep this promise that I'll do the same in Santa Fe. I mean, I will vote for the benefit of my Senate district, regardless of who's carrying that bill or if there's a party label attached to that. And it's a promise that I'm certain that I'll keep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, every legislator or elected official should feel that way. I mean, I view it as you're really not there for what you do. You're there for what your people that elected you want you to do.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this. I mentioned that my predecessor and the one before them spent a lot of time, and I respect them for offering that service to New Mexico. I don't intend to be here for 30 years. I can promise you that I won't be. I'm here to get a job done. I'm here to get it done quickly and effectively and efficiently as possible, and then create a better New Mexico that I can return to my district and we can live by. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see more legislators flowing in and out of our legislative body up there to get to work, get the job done, and go back. But I'm not a career politician. I can promise you that I won't get too comfortable up there.
That's fantastic. What are your thoughts on things like introducing term limits to the state legislature, or creating a new amendment to the state constitution to allow a recall of an elected official in the state?
I don't find any harm in that. I know that we don't have that now, and everyone always, regardless of which governor's up there, the other party wants to recall it. I guess I haven't heard both sides of that argument well enough to have much of an opinion. I don't see on a surface level the harm creating a recall law. As far as term limits, I think I would certainly consider that. But at the same time, I also want to mention this, that a lot of people don't know. This is much like a school board, a volunteer position. We are not compensated for this job. And there's a lot of time, 2 months out of the year, we're in Santa Fe. We sit on several committees. And so you hear a lot of times from these elected legislators, they remind you that they're volunteer, and I don't know if that really sinks in, because it's a lot of time. It's a full-time job if you're doing your job well, right, to advocate for New Mexico. And so that's why I'm telling you, I'm not going to commit my whole life to being up here and working for free for New Mexico, but I'm going to commit enough of myself to see positive change for my community and my family. So at the same time that I said I would consider term limits, I would also consider fair compensation for your legislators. And I'll tell you why. Because otherwise you are influenced by outside special interest groups who have the money. And it's just a fact. I'd like to see campaign finance reform so that I can't, nor can any other legislator except just, you can't even imagine the amount of money that'll start flowing into these small rural Senate races in the forms of flyers and mailers and advertisers. I'd like to see that capped, but I think at some point there could be a balance to just fairly compensate your legislators. And then work on campaign finance reform in a whole broad picture to create kind of just more transparency and to be fair to people's time. And then, you know what? When our job's done, kick us out. I'm fine with that.
All right. Go into a little bit about what is the actual job description. What is the time commitment for a state senator?
So I'm new to this. Like I'm a senator elect, and I'll tell you that it's still taking a lot of time. So like my day began today at 7 a.m. I visited with one of my school districts in Hatch. As soon as I jump off of this, I'm going to make sure that I pop into my Deming Independent School District school board meeting. I've already been able to tour them. It's important to me to keep up the momentum getting out of this campaign, to circle back with everybody. So it's important to me to make sure that I'm still connected to the people in my community, and that message that I presented while campaigning, that I am a messenger for their message. And so in order for me to carry an accurate message, I'm going to have to stay in constant communication. I intend to spend a lot of time within my district. It hasn't stopped since the campaign, and I haven't even been sworn in yet. It's legislative session is still up in the air. Like, what does that look like in a COVID world? Campaigning was weird enough. Now we're talking about having a virtual legislative session. I've been very open with as much media that'll talk to me about what a disservice that is for New Mexicans, and how that we should be objecting to that. I mean, literally, we are locking the front doors to the people's house. And when we talk about why we hate backroom political deals, to leave out the New Mexico public from the lawmaking process, where we're going to create legislation that impacts your every single daily life without having expert witnesses, testimony, real life public comment, is absurd to me that we would even consider that. So I know that constitutionally we have to open on the third Tuesday. Maybe a legislative session opens and immediately adjourns, and we come back when it's safer for a special session. But whatever we do, we need to make sure that we include the public. And I'm going to tell you that I don't believe that a virtual session is realistic. I think that if you really want to see some backroom deals, I will tell you that having conversations and debating to bills over Zoom is a waste of time. That everything will have been determined before we even logged on. So it's a waste of our time, and it's completely disrespectful to the citizens of New Mexico.
100%. 100%. So
yeah,
as a citizen, I certainly appreciate you pushing that to have open, transparent, in-person public meetings.
It's important. I mean, New Mexico is unique in the fact that we are very open, and there's a communication between legislators. Like, our legislators are very accessible up in Santa Fe. I would hate to allow COVID to finally be the one that started changing that from this moment forward, there was kind of this shield in which we were much difficult to access up there. It's wrong. I mean, we work for the people. And so for me not to act, it's like sending me to work and then telling me to cut off access from my boss. Like, go to your, but my boss is not in the roundhouse. My boss is the elected people who elected me to do a job. And if I'm carrying their message, I need to make sure that communication is open. They need to be able to walk into a house that is theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Crystal, what is your vision for the future of Southern New Mexico in, say, 5, 10, 20 years?
I think this is really sad, but I think that the recent legislature has done such a terrible job of managing our funds that I'd like to get on here and talk about fun pet projects and building up and promise all these, everything from parks to whatever it takes, right? And the reality is we're broke. And so everybody wants to talk about what their pet project is, what they see envisioned. We're so broke that for the next at least 2-3 years, the focus of New Mexico is going to have to be on filling deficits. I mean, we have deficits to address. So this isn't fun. Like, my first term clearly isn't fun. I think I'm going to be sworn in on Zoom to my duties, and then I get to go try to find money to pay for the last legislators' overspending, careless, reckless spending. When this administration took over, I think they had $200 million in reserves, and now I'm going in, and they think they have that in a deficit. I mean, oil prices aren't looking any better from the last reports, so we're going in there to kind of plug holes. That's not fun, but I will tell you that for the next 2-3 years, we're going to have to come together to really see some good progress into trying to build up those reserves and trying to get New Mexico financially solvent. And I say that because at the same time, when we have to really start tightening our belt, I think we still need to look at infrastructure. No pet projects. Are we funding infrastructure, and are we funding economic development? And that's it. Because jobs are still going to have to be job number one. It's not fun to talk about it, but there's people out there without a job. That's what we need to be focused on, right? I mean, so all of our resources are going to have to go to that. And how do you build and quickly build a stronger New Mexico? I mean, economically, we're devastated. And I say that, and I don't even know if we've seen the worst of it. right? I mean, here
Yep.
we are in the middle of COVID. I can't say that I agree with the management of how we're managing COVID. I think that the impact to New Mexico's economy has been so detrimental that you could argue that it possibly outweighs any threat of the health risk posed to us.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you talk about state having deficits, and now we're shutting down businesses and losing more and more businesses every day.
Yeah, every
So
day.
what's
And we're not
you
going to
know
have the federal funds like we did last time. I mean, people are about to feel it right now over Christmas. I mean, it's going to start impacting everybody. And it gets worse daily. I mean, I just caught some tail end of the governor's just address now. I understand that, like, on the east side, we even have grocery stores that are shut down. Like, how in the world
yeah,
do
even
I
Las
live
Cruces.
in Cruces? Do we?
Yeah, we just lost Walmart and Albertsons.
It's mind-boggling that I live in like a modern day America in which people are having trouble accessing food.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, I
That's
just
scary.
it's scary, and I don't know if people are scared enough. Like, I don't know at what point people start waking up, but we're in a very scary point here in New Mexico for a lot of reasons. For a lot of reasons, but economically is kind of my area that I'm going to get up there, the challenge, and we're in trouble, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better anytime soon.
Yeah, yeah, which is unfortunate. So great to have somebody that recognizes that going into office and is willing to stand up and fight for it, and not just go be a yes man. I don't know what to say. Somebody that just goes up and nods their head and
yeah, there's a
does
lot
what
of
the
rubber
governor wants to
stamps.
do.
There's a lot of rubber stamps on both sides. So
There you go.
I'm still optimistic. I'll tell you that as we go up there, how can you, like, what is your strategy when you only have 15 Republicans in the Senate? Like, how are we going to get anything done? And I am convinced, and I've said this all along, that the divide in New Mexico is not R versus D. I just campaigned on this. It is not Republican versus Democrat. It is urban versus rural. And if there was anything that this last election showed us, it was that. And so if rural New Mexico, rural and remote New Mexico wants to get anything done, we are going to have to build alliances, R's and D's, to bring a united, collective, rural New Mexico voice forward. And I say that because, like, there's parts of Albuquerque in which they're trying to manage education. Well, they all have accessible internet. I have school districts, I mean, that have zero internet. And so they're moving forward with how we go into virtual learning and what that looks like in the future. I have kids who have never are missing. They're unaccounted for because there's no internet. We haven't heard from them from the middle of last March. You know, I mean, I have Luna County, in which we send 8 school buses down to Palomas, and we move these kids across the border. We haven't heard from some of these kids since we shut down schools in March. So rural New Mexico, that the same can be said for healthcare, for our infrastructure needs, for so much that sometimes I feel like everything north of I-40 up in Albuquerque goes ignored. I mean, we are missing an entire population of New Mexico. And I think that we can argue that when we were just talking about, like, what does a legislative body look like? What does session look like? To even suggest that we should go virtual leaves out an entire population of rural New Mexico who doesn't even have internet access to participate in the process. So I feel like we're discriminating against an entire population of New Mexico once again.
Yeah, 100%. Wow. That's crazy. Well, I know the time's about up, and I want to be sensitive to your time. One final question: what is your favorite thing about living in southern New Mexico?
The people, by far. Like, absolutely the people. I feel like people here, they've been here for generations, so they have stories to tell. Like, the best part of campaigning was, and I campaigned during COVID, and I went door to door. Social distance, stood back, but hearing people's stories and what's important to them, like, it's a common, you start running into, like, common threads of what unites us all as New Mexicans. And so I think just that people are passionate about their community. We can talk about all the reasons why New Mexico is bottom of every list and this and that, and then at the end of the conversation, everyone's still committed to staying here and bettering this state. Like, no one's throwing their hands up and leaving. Right? And we all threaten to, every single time, we all threaten to leave, but everyone's like, no, we are committed to this fight. And I think, especially kind of here in southern New Mexico, it's different. It's different. We don't have people coming in and out like you may see in urban areas. And so by far the people.
Awesome. Yeah, we don't call it the land of entrapment for nothing, right?
That's right. I mean, once you're here, you're here. We're all in it together, right?
For sure. For sure. Well, Crystal, how can people get a hold of you or follow what you're doing?
Yeah, so the easiest way always is to text me. My phone number is on Facebook. It's also on my website. What is my website? Crystal, it's Diamond, DIAMOND, diamond4nm.com. My phone number is 575-740-1539. Text me, especially if we're up there in Santa Fe and you need to get some message to me fast. I'm happy to carry any of my constituents' message. So and come see me in Santa Fe. I know that's a weird invitation in a COVID world because I don't know what that looks like. But when we start transitioning back into normal, like I want constituents to join me in Santa Fe and be part of this fight.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Great getting to know you.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Ben. Take care.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, bye.
We're all good there, Whitney.